I spent years being the outsider, laughed at for every strange thought. Then one night, the system collapsed, and suddenly my crazy idea was the only thing that worked. They used to call me the corner kid. Not to my face, at least not at first, but I heard it enough times to know it stuck. At school, it was whispered behind lockers. At family dinners, it showed up as smirks when I shared an idea. At work, later on, it became the way people looked at me when I spoke, like I had three heads and none of them made sense. I was the odd one, the weird one, the guy who never quite said the right thing, never dressed like the rest, never laughed at the right jokes. And God help me, I never once knew how to just go with the flow. That phrase always rubbed me the wrong way, like it was code for shut up and be normal. My name is Jack, by the way, Jack Merritt. And for most of my life, I lived in the shadows of other people's expectations. I remember in 6th grade, we had this project to build a model bridge out of popsicle sticks. Everyone made the same truss-style structure we had seen in the example video. But not me. I built a suspension bridge. I even used fishing wire for the cables and balanced the weight across a curved base. My teacher looked at it and said, "That's not what I asked for." That was all. No credit for thinking outside the box. No curiosity about how it worked. Just a red X for not following the blueprint. That kind of thing happened a lot. If I did what everyone else did, it felt like lying. But if I did things my own way, it was disruptive. I learned pretty early that people do not like different. They pretend to, but only when different comes with $1 million check or a viral video. Before that, they treat you like a malfunctioning appliance. My parents? They did not get me either. My mom was all about appearances, nails done, voice sweet as syrup, always smiling when company was around. My dad believed in grit and discipline. He used to say, "There's no room for dreamers in this house. You want to make it? Learn a trade, get your head out of the clouds." I tried. I really did. I played sports. I joined clubs. I wore the right clothes. But no matter how hard I tried to fit in, it felt like trying to squeeze into a jacket 2 sizes too small. It looked fine on the hanger, but left me gasping when I put it on. The funny part is, even when I shut up, they still found ways to make me feel like a freak. At a family barbecue once, I mentioned this idea I had for redirecting stormwater from gutters to irrigate lawns. Nothing wild. Just something I sketched out one night when I could not sleep. My uncle chuckled and said, "You got a brain, kid, but no sense. Nobody's paying for that." My cousin called me Rainman for the rest of the day. That stuck too. Over time, I learned to keep my ideas to myself. I would see a problem and think of 5 different ways to solve it, but I would say nothing. What was the point? People had already made up their minds about me. I became the quiet one in the meeting, the guy who stayed late not because he was slow, but because he had 3 better ways to finish a task and no one to tell them to. At parties, I was the one standing in the corner with a drink going warm in my hand, watching everyone else connect like I had missed the class on how to be human. And then, just when I had fully accepted that I would always be the strange one, the watcher, the outsider, something happened. Something that flipped everything upside down. And for the first time in my life, being the odd one made me the only one who could save the day. Even though I stopped speaking up, my brain never really stopped spinning. I was always noticing things, little things other people missed. Patterns, timing, habits, gaps. Like how the manager at my last job always left his email open when he went to lunch. Or how the heating vent in our apartment clicked 3 times right before the upstairs neighbor's dog started barking. Or how the server at the diner I went to every Tuesday wrote down everyone's order except mine. She just remembered mine, because I always asked for the same thing, down to the type of toast and how I liked my eggs. My mind was like a radar set to pick up noise no one else heard. At work, that meant I saw problems before they happened. We had this ancient inventory system, slow, clunky, barely held together with digital duct tape. Everyone hated it, but no one dared suggest a fix because the higher-ups did not want to rock the boat. So I built a workaround on my own time. A basic Python script that pulled numbers from our inventory logs and ran simple alerts when something looked off. I showed it to my team lead once. He said, "Neat, but that's not really your job." That stung more than I expected. It was not about credit. I could live without a pat on the back. But the fact that he looked right through it like it meant nothing, it was like being invisible all over again. I started thinking maybe I was wired wrong. Maybe I was doomed to always see the hidden threads, only for everyone else to ignore them. Maybe some people just were not meant to be part of the group. But I kept building. At night, I would code. On weekends, I would read. I started keeping a sketchbook of oddball solutions to problems I spotted. Everything from reorganizing warehouse shelves to rerouting commuter buses more efficiently. None of it went anywhere, but it helped me breathe. Then, about 2 months ago, something strange happened. We had this routine update at work, just a server patch for security. No one paid it any mind. But I noticed something odd in the logs. The timing was off. The traffic to the database spiked right after the patch, not before. I flagged it. No one listened. They said it was just lag from the update and to stop wasting time. But I could feel it. Deep down, something was wrong. I spent the next few nights digging into old backups, combing through system logs line by line. And what I found made my stomach drop. We were being watched. Some kind of backdoor script had been inserted. It was subtle, elegant, something that only ran between midnight and 2 in the morning, pulling small pieces of user data and sending it to a location outside the country. When I brought it to the IT supervisor, he just blinked at me. Then he asked, "How did you even notice this?" I told him I did not sleep much, that I had a weird feeling, that I paid attention. He said they would look into it, then told me to focus on my own responsibilities. 3 days later, we had a company-wide meeting. Not because of what I found, but because our entire system had crashed. Completely. Files locked. Data scrambled. Customers frozen out. It was the worst breach in company history. And I already knew. This was just the beginning. The morning everything crashed, the office was in chaos. Phones ringing nonstop. Emails piling up in the hundreds. Nobody knew what to do. Our internal systems were scrambled, files corrupted, passwords rejected, backups useless. People were just standing there, frozen in front of their screens, waiting for someone else to fix it. I already knew it was not going to be fixed by anyone in that room. Our IT lead, Marcus, paced back and forth muttering, "This does not make sense. This should not be happening." Like repeating it was going to make the server gods undo the mess. He looked right past me when I said I had seen something weird earlier in the week. Again, that was when I made a decision. I walked to my desk, opened up the encrypted flash drive I had kept just in case, and pulled up the logs I had copied, quietly, 2 nights ago. Stuff no one else even knew I had. I was not trying to play hero. Honestly, I just hated being helpless. I had lived too much of my life on the outside looking in. If there was even a 1% chance I could help, I had to try. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This was not some random hack. It was targeted, specific. Someone had wormed their way into our system through a vendor's compromised software, piggybacking off an update nobody double-checked. And whoever it was, they were not just stealing data. They were laying groundwork for something bigger, something designed to make us implode. I took it all to Marcus again, showed him proof, outlined how the backdoor got in, even offered a potential fix. His eyes scanned the screen, slow and stiff like he was reading a language he barely understood. Then he asked the one question that made me want to scream. "Where did you get this?" Not, "Can we use this?" Not, "How did you figure it out?" Just suspicion. Like my very ability to notice the breach was reason enough to treat me like a threat. I stared at him, waiting for the next insult. It came quick. "You shouldn't be digging this deep. Let the professionals handle it." The word professionals hit like a slap. I had heard it before. From teachers, from bosses, from my own family. It was the polite way of saying, "You are not one of us." And in that moment, I realized just how far they were willing to go to ignore the truth, just to protect their pride. I left his office without another word. But what I did next, that was the moment everything changed. Because I knew something they didn't. The attack wasn't over. By that evening, the office looked like a war zone. People shouting over each other, server lights blinking like panic signals, the higher-ups huddled in the conference room whispering like they were planning a funeral. I sat alone at my desk. No one asked what I was doing, which worked out fine, because I was working on something they would not have approved of anyway. While they scrambled to plug holes, I was building a tool to trace the breach back to its source. Nothing fancy, just a custom script that pinged data packets and cross-checked IP anomalies from our vendor's update logs. I had to jump through firewalls and fake user sessions just to keep it running unnoticed. But I had done stuff like this before. This was not my first time quietly solving a problem while people ignored me. The weirdest part? I was calm. It was like my brain had been waiting for this kind of moment. where normal thinking failed, and something stranger had to take its place. Then I saw it. A signal buried deep. Not just one source, but three. The breach was not from a single hacker. It was a coordinated hit, and they were still in our system, just waiting for the next trigger. At the rate things were going, our customer database, millions of names, addresses, and account numbers, was about to be wiped. And once it was gone for good. I stood up, heart pounding in my ears. I walked straight to the CTO's office, Dan Fletcher. He was in the middle of a call, red-faced, trying to sound like he had things under control. I waited until he noticed me. When he waved me off like I was delivering coffee, I said one thing. If you do not act in the next hour, your entire database will vanish. Every backup will be bricked. You will lose everything. That got his attention. He lowered the phone slowly and said, "What did you say?" So I told him everything. What I had found, how it worked, what I had traced. I even showed him proof. He sat there, blinking, clearly struggling to decide whether to believe me or dismiss me. That is when someone else burst into the room. Marcus. He saw me, saw Dan looking at my screen, and immediately went into defense mode. He is overstepping, Marcus snapped. He is not authorized to access that level of data. Dan raised a hand to shut him up. He kept reading, flipping through my code, following the traces I had mapped. I could see it, the realization dawning in his eyes like a sunrise he never expected. "You found this on your own?" he asked. I nodded. Then I told him the worst part. This is not over. The final breach activates at midnight. He glanced at the clock. It was almost 11. The color drained from his face. "Can you stop it?" he asked. I paused. The truth was, I did not know. But I had to try. At 11:04, I was logged into a machine they never gave me access to. Dan had waved me through after reading the trace I built. Marcus stormed out of the room like a kid who just got grounded, mumbling something about policy violations and chain of command. But no one followed him. Not anymore. Suddenly, everyone was looking at me, the quiet guy from the corner. And let me tell you, I was terrified. Not because I doubted the work. I had triple-checked every line of code, every log entry, every trace route. But I had never been trusted with this much weight before. No one had ever asked me to save anything. And now, here I was, racing a clock no one else even saw until it was almost too late. The thing about this breach, it was not just data theft. It was elegant sabotage. A ghost program, spread across multiple systems, disguised as routine vendor updates. It would trigger itself at midnight, rewriting our archives one sector at a time, using secure credentials from a fake admin account that somehow looked real on paper. If I had not noticed the shift in upload behavior after the patch, no one would have caught it until the final stage was over. That was the part that haunted me. How many other things had I seen and ignored just to avoid being called crazy? Now I had less than an hour to shut it down. The only way to stop it was to isolate the infected pathways, block the trigger from reaching the mainframe, and reroute all login activity to a sandbox server I had spun up just that afternoon. Except there was a catch. To isolate the breach completely, I had to sever part of the internal network, temporarily, which meant our system would go dark for 7 minutes. Phones, emails, transactions, everything would freeze. Dan hesitated when I told him. "If this does not work," he said, "we are toast." I told him if we did nothing, we were toast anyway. He looked at me long and hard. Then he said, "Do it." That one moment, that one tiny word, it felt like lightning in my chest. I moved fast. No hesitation now. I pushed the quarantine commands through, diverted traffic to the sandbox, and began blocking the access paths one by one. At 11:49, the first warning hit. The breach had activated early, probably sensing the isolation. It had started its process. Just as I feared, the system lit up with alerts. Data wipe in progress. Emergency scripts failing. I had minutes, maybe. I reached for my final script. The one they all laughed at last year when I tried to pitch it. I had called it a self-healing diagnostic bridge, a name they said sounded like something from a sci-fi movie. It was built for exactly this. And now? It was the only shot we had. I hit run. The screen froze. Then flickered. Then, the screen flickered once more. Then the cursor blinked. Just a small, pulsing line in the middle of a black console. It felt like the longest second of my life. Then one word appeared. Isolated. I blinked, barely breathing. That meant the breach had been cut off, completely. The database was safe. The ghost script had been neutralized before it could finish corrupting the core files. The sandbox server had caught the last fragments and shut them down. The system began crawling back to life, piece by piece. A low murmur filled the room. People were leaning forward in their chairs, watching the monitors light up green again. Dan turned toward me, slow, like he was afraid it might still all vanish. "You actually stopped it," he said, voice just above a whisper. But before I could even feel relief, my eyes locked onto something else on the screen. A blinking tab I had not opened, something new, something buried. It was a message file, tucked deep in the logs. I clicked it, and what I saw flipped everything upside down. The script had not come from outside. It had been uploaded internally 3 weeks ago by someone inside the company, someone with admin access, and not just any admin, Marcus. The guy who had spent all day dismissing me. The one who said I was just overstepping. He had been the one to approve the vendor update that opened the breach in the first place. And now I was staring at a trail of encrypted commands, signed by his credentials. It was not just negligence. It was intentional. I felt my pulse in my throat. I pulled up timestamps, file paths, command histories. It was all there, plain as day. Marcus had let the breach in. Whether he was paid off, blackmailed, or doing it for revenge, I had no idea yet. But he had placed the company's entire system in danger and blamed me for stepping out of line when I got too close. Dan looked over my shoulder as I pieced it together. He did not say a word for a long moment. Then he grabbed his phone and walked out of the room, fast. I sat there, hands still on the keyboard, the room around me now dead silent again. People were watching me, but this time, it was not suspicion in their eyes. It was something closer to disbelief. I had gone from the guy in the corner to the guy who had just saved the whole damn company. And now? Now I had proof that the biggest threat had not come from some shadowy foreign hacker, but from someone we all worked with. Someone who had been smiling and sipping coffee in the break room while he planted a bomb under our feet. But I was not done yet, because when I opened the last hidden file, I saw something I was not prepared for. It was not just our company that had been targeted. There were others. I stared at the screen. One folder. Multiple files, each one labeled with dates, company codes, and internal usernames that had nothing to do with us. Marcus had not just planted a bomb in our system. He had helped spread the same breach into at least 4 other networks. A tech startup in Austin, a logistics firm in Chicago, even a public utility provider out in Ohio. All of them had similar vendor patch trails. All of them quietly infected. What I was looking at was not a simple act of sabotage. This was a coordinated attack, a campaign. And Marcus? He was a node in a bigger system. I clicked through the metadata, digging deeper, pulling info fast before someone decided I should stop. Each file showed traces of the same upload protocol, routed through a series of shell companies and rerouted IPs. But one thing connected them all. A fake firm listed on all the invoices. GridLink Solutions. I had never heard of it. I ran a search. No website. No physical address. No tax ID that checked out. But every infected company had paid GridLink for backend systems consulting. A ghost company, which meant someone out there was building a web of access into private networks under the radar. Not ransomware. Not identity theft. This was slower. Smarter. They were setting up infrastructure, like planning routes into a city long before you invade it. And if I had not stumbled onto the breach by accident, none of this would have been found. A chill ran through me as I scrolled back through the logs. I started thinking about the bridge idea I had in 6th grade. The way everyone told me it was pointless. How I had noticed the imbalance in the weight distribution that even the teacher missed and still got a failing grade. That feeling was back now. Only this time, the stakes were not a homework assignment. This was real. And the people who had dismissed me, they were now realizing just how close they had come to losing everything. Dan came back into the room about 20 minutes later. His jaw was tight. No emotion on his face. "Marcus is gone," he said flatly. Security pulled him off site. Nobody cheered. No one clapped. It was just quiet. He turned to me again, slower this time. Like he did not want to break whatever spell was holding everything together. "I need you to write this up. Everything you found. Make it clear, Jack." I just nodded. I was already writing. But as I typed, I kept wondering something I could not shake. If someone inside helped do this to us, how many more are there? And why now? What was GridLink really after? Because the deeper I looked, the more I realized. We were not the only ones with something to lose. I went home that night, but sleep was not even a remote possibility. My brain would not shut off. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every screen, every folder name, every log entry. The gridlink trail was still buzzing in my head, like a loose wire sparking in the dark. By 3 in the morning, I gave up. I brewed stale coffee and opened my laptop. I was not supposed to keep digging. I had already gone way past my pay grade. But the thing was, I needed to understand. Needed to know if what I saw was just the edge of something bigger. Because if Marcus was working with them, that meant someone had gotten to him. And if they could get to him, someone who knew the system inside and out. What stopped them from getting to others? I started combing through archived registries, deep web company records, anything I could get without breaching legal boundaries. I searched for gridlink solutions in every state and every language variation I could think of. And eventually, I found something. A company with the same name had been listed under a different address 2 years ago. That one had since shut down. But before it vanished, it had filed a contract with a subcontractor called NorthX Modular, a defense supplier. That hit me like a punch to the ribs. NorthX made communications software. Stuff used in city infrastructure, emergency response, even defense drills. What the hell was a consulting firm like Gridlink doing connected to that? It did not make sense. Unless the point was never just to steal data or money. What if the goal was access? Not just corporate systems, but public ones. Infrastructure, response times, power grids, emergency channels. This whole time, we thought we were the product, the data. But what if we were just the testing ground? A low-level corporate network like ours, it was a perfect place to experiment. No one watches too closely. No red flags unless something explodes. And that midnight trigger? It had not been about erasing data. It had been about seeing how fast we could recover, how fast I could react. They were mapping responses, running drills. It was not a breach. It was a simulation. I sat back in my chair, hands shaking a little. And then, my laptop screen went black. No warning. No crash report. Just black. My heart slammed into my chest. I reached for the power button, but before I could touch it, the screen blinked back to life. A single message appeared, centered on the screen. "We see you too, Jack." That was all. I slammed the lid shut and yanked the cord from the wall like a bomb had just been triggered. My apartment was dead quiet, but I could feel it. Something had just shifted. I was not the odd one anymore. Now, I was a threat. The message on my screen haunted me all night. I powered down everything, even pulled the battery from my old phone, just in case. Paranoia had crept in like smoke under the door, and I had breathed it in deep. By morning, the fear turned into focus. If they had eyes on me, then they knew what I had uncovered. That meant I had hit a nerve. Whatever Gridlink really was, whoever they were working for, they were watching. And now I had their attention. I grabbed an old laptop from college, wiped it, and started rebuilding everything offline. No network, no cloud syncs. Just me and a local drive. I rebuilt the trace logs from memory, adding new data from the public records I had scraped overnight. Every piece of it confirmed what I already suspected. This was not a one-time operation. This was a quiet war. Someone was preparing the digital equivalent of a first strike. And the reason they used a company like ours was because no one would ever expect it. We were the test case, a proof of concept. And now that I had figured it out, I was officially in the way. That afternoon, Dan called me back into his office. He looked different, tired, older somehow, like the last few days had sucked the color out of him. "I've been in meetings since 7, he said. "Legal, executive board, risk teams. Everyone wants to sweep this thing under the rug." I figured that was coming. "Are they going to report it?" I asked. Dan paused. That pause said everything. "They're considering options," he replied. "They don't want panic." I stared at him, unsure if I felt angry or just disappointed. Maybe both. "They still think this is just about our company," I said. Dan nodded slowly. "They don't understand what it really is. And honestly, I don't think they want to." Then he looked at me, direct, serious. "They're asking questions, Jack. Not just about the breach, but about you. About how you knew what you knew. About your access level. About why you kept looking when they told you not to." There it was. The gratitude phase was over. Now came the suspicion. I had seen this pattern before, just on a smaller scale. People fear what they cannot explain. And when someone who used to be invisible suddenly becomes necessary, it throws everything off balance. They think I'm part of it. I asked, not even sure if I was angry or just numb. Dan shook his head. They don't know what to think. That's the problem. I left his office without saying much. Because deep down, I already knew how this would go. They would thank me publicly, maybe give me a bonus, maybe even throw around words like hero at the next company meeting. But behind closed doors, they would box me in, cut off my access, reassign me to something harmless, and eventually push me out. Because nobody likes to admit the guy in the corner saw something the rest of them missed, especially when what he saw could save them again. I walked past the server room on my way out that night. I looked at the blinking lights and cables, quiet now, but alive. And I realized something that made my skin crawl. That breach. It had a fallback route. Gridlink had built in a secondary trigger, and it was still active. I thought I had ended it, but I was wrong. The second trigger was hidden deeper than the first. It was buried so far down in the system that even the backup logs skipped over it. I only found it because I knew where to look, because I remembered something no one else even noticed. 3 weeks ago, someone had changed the server's time zone setting by 15 minutes. Not a big deal, right? Except it shifted the log timestamps just enough to mask when the original breach was installed. The breach looked like it started at one time, when it had actually started earlier. That 15-minute window was the gap where the real payload slipped in unnoticed. It was brilliant. Sick, but brilliant. And now that I found the second trigger, I finally understood what it was designed to do. It would not erase anything. It would replace it. The code was set to deploy a fake version of our customer records, filled with false data, names, addresses, banking info, all fabricated. It would go live without alerting the system, and the company would spend weeks, maybe months, operating on bad intel. By the time they figured it out, Gridlink would already be gone. And the scary part? It was scheduled to launch during the quarterly audit, 3 days from now. It would look like our mistake, like someone inside had corrupted the backup protocols. It would wreck our credibility, tank our stock, open us to legal hell. A slow death, perfectly planned. I stayed up for 2 nights straight rebuilding my isolation script. I made a new failsafe, hidden behind an old diagnostics file. I disguised the activation key behind a fake printer status alert, and I sent it only to myself, encrypted, backed up twice on drives I buried in 2 separate lockers at different bus stations. I was not taking chances, because here was the truth. Nobody else was going to stop this. The board did not want noise. Legal wanted silence. HR wanted distance. So I leaned into what I had always been, the corner kid, the odd one, the guy nobody expected. And when audit day came, I walked in early, sat down at my desk like it was any other Tuesday, and waited. 10 minutes into the audit simulation, the fake data started pushing into the system. Everything looked normal. Then my trigger fired. My failsafe kicked in. And just like that, the fake records collapsed. The system rejected them. The false files vanished. The alert pinged once. Quiet, subtle. No drama. Just gone. I watched it happen in real time. And no one even noticed, except Dan. He turned and looked at me from across the floor. No words. Just a nod. Later that week, he called me in. He said the board had offered him a promotion, chief of operations. But he was declining. He was retiring. Then he slid a folder across the table. A plain manila folder. Inside, a job offer. Not from our company. From an independent cyber defense task force. Government adjacent. He said, they want someone who sees what others miss. I gave them your name. I stared at the folder. Then at him. You sure? I asked. He smiled, just a little. You were never supposed to be here, Jack. You were always thinking a few layers ahead. They thought you were strange. I think you're exactly what the future needs. I left that job a week later. Not with a party. Not with a speech. Just a quiet exit from the corner no one watched. Until it saved them. So yeah, being the weird one. Turns out that is what saved them all.